All right, let's dive in. We're tackling meta-modernism today, and specifically how it grapples with this whole idea of identity.
Big topic.
It is, and our listeners always come through with awesome source material. This time we've got notes and even film recommendations from the Between Shelves podcast, Ep04.
Oh, I love that podcast.
Big F.
They always have such insightful guests.
Right. So it seems like we're trying to figure out what it even means to be someone in the 21st century.
And when, everything feels so fluid.
Exactly. Everything's in constant flux. So where do we even begin?
Well, it's interesting how metamodernism goes beyond just slapping labels on ourselves. It's more about a whole cultural shift.
Okay, so no more fitting ourselves into neat little boxes.
Exactly. Metamodernism pushes back against those rigid categories we got from modernism, with its strict logic and fixed truths.
And even postmodernism, which often felt like it was deconstructing everything with this, cynical edge.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, metamodernism is about embracing the gray areas, the paradoxes.
The idea that we can hold what seem like totally opposite ideas or beliefs at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, wait. So someone could be a hardcore tech CEO and a devout traditionalist all at once. How does that work in metamodernism?
That's where it gets really interesting. The Between Shelves podcast notes lay out these 6 key ideas about metamodernism and identity.
6 key ideas. All right, lay them on me.
Well, one of the most intriguing ones is this concept of embracing paradox and ambiguity. It suggests that those seemingly contradictory aspects can actually coexist within us.
Instead of having to pick a side or resolve the tension.
Exactly. It's not about erasing those contradictions, but recognizing that they're both part of the picture.
Yeah.
That they even contribute to who we are.
So it's about leaning into the complexity.
Yes, and acknowledging that those tensions can actually be a source of growth.
That actually makes a lot of sense. I'm already thinking about a few contradictions in my own life. What else stood out to you from the notes?
The idea of fluidity in process is definitely central. It's this notion that, instead of viewing identity as this fixed destination.
We should see it more as an ongoing journey.
Yes. A constant state of becoming. We're shaped by every experience, every relationship, every interaction we have.
So it's like that old saying, you can't step in the same river twice.
I love that.
But metamodernism is saying, you're the river, always changing.
Exactly. And all those experiences, relationships, those are the currents that are shaping you, right?
That's a pretty powerful reframing. What about this interconnectedness thing? The notes mention that too, right?
Right. It's the understanding that we don't form our identities in a vacuum. Our sense of self is so deeply influenced by the communities we belong to, the cultures we're exposed to, even the systems we're part of.
So even when we feel like we're making independent choices about who we are, we're actually being shaped by forces larger than ourselves.
Yeah, it's like this dynamic interplay between our personal agency and those bigger social structures that influence our lives.
Yeah.
And metamodernism recognizes that.
Wow. So it's like acknowledging we're both individual and part of a collective all at the same time. Okay, this is making me rethink some things. But I have to admit, this aesthetic playfulness thing mentioned in the notes kind of throws me off. Does metamodernism just want us all to be, artsy and ironic?
Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. Metamodernism recognizes that identity can be performative. We present different versions of ourselves depending on the situation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it often uses art, storytelling, even irony as a way to explore those different facets.
So it's not about being frivolous, but using those creative tools to, reflect on the roles we play and how they shape who we are.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those layers without falling into cynicism.
Okay, that makes more sense. And speaking of questioning things, the notes also mentioned a critique of outdated frameworks. What kind of frameworks are we talking about here?
Metamodernism challenges those traditional categories of identity we've inherited. Things like race, gender, or culture, especially when they become rigid boxes.
So it's pushing for a more fluid understanding.
Yes. A more inclusive understanding of identity that recognizes each person's unique, evolving selfhood.
Okay, this is definitely giving me a whole new perspective. But before I get totally lost in all these ideas, can we connect this back to those films mentioned in the podcast notes? I'm really curious to see how this all plays out on screen.
Absolutely. That's where it gets even more interesting. The films they recommend are a fantastic way to see these metamodernist ideas in action.
They specifically called out Everything Everywhere All at Once, Moonlight, and The Matrix Resurrections. They said those were particularly insightful for understanding identity through this metamodernist lens. Should we start with Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Let's jump into the multiverse.
That film was incredible. The visuals were mind-blowing, and the story, wow, so brilliantly complex.
Remember that whole multiverse idea we talked about?
Mm.
This film is a multiverse of identity.
Whoa, yeah.
Evelyn, the main character, isn't just one person. She's all the possible versions of herself existing at once. Kind of mind-blowing, right?
It totally is. And that idea that our identity is multifaceted, not just one fixed thing, that feels very meta-modernist.
Exactly. The film uses the multiverse to show that even seemingly insignificant choices create wildly different versions of ourselves.
It suggests we're always becoming never fixed, which aligns perfectly with the meta-modern perspective, right?
So it's not about finding that one true self, but recognizing the multiplicity and accepting all those different facets.
Yeah, those parts of ourselves that make us who we are.
Exactly. And remember the everything bagel.
Oh, yeah, how could I forget?
That's such a powerful symbol of nihilism, the idea that if everything matters, then nothing really does.
Right.
But Evelyn ultimately chooses to find meaning in the connections she has, especially with her family, even amidst the chaos.
So it's like the film acknowledges the potential for meaninglessness, but ultimately chooses hope and connection.
Absolutely. And it doesn't shy away from those big philosophical questions while also being hilarious and heartwarming.
Mm-hmm.
It even touches on those deeper, almost spiritual aspects of identity.
You're bringing up this idea of meta-spirituality, which is also central to meta-modernism.
It is.
Meta-spirituality. Is that like searching for meaning and purpose, even if you don't follow a specific religion? Is that what the film shows us?
Absolutely. It encourages us to move beyond rigid dualities and find meaning and connection amidst the chaos of existence.
That's a great segue to Moonlight. It's such a beautiful film that explores identity in this deeply personal way.
It really shows how much our relationships, our environment, even our own self-perception can impact our journey of self-discovery.
And Chiron's story is so moving. We see him navigating these pivotal moments in his life, coming to terms with his identity as a young Black man grappling with his sexuality in a world that, doesn't make it easy for him.
And remember that concept of oscillation we discussed?
Yeah.
Chiron embodies that perfectly. His shifts between hardness and vulnerability aren't contradictions. They're meta-modernism in action. He's not one thing, but a constant flow, like Moonlight itself.
That's such a beautiful way to put it. He's constantly pushing back against those societal forces that are trying to define him, but you see the impact those forces have on him too.
And that push and pull, that tension between those opposing forces is at the very heart of meta-modernism.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing those complexities and embracing those contradictions without trying to force them into neat, tidy categories. It's through those struggles, that we really see the depth and beauty of Chiron's character emerge.
Absolutely. And this whole idea of struggle and pushing back against the system, really resonated with me in The Matrix Resurrections. That film takes us into this whole digital world and how it impacts our sense of self.
It's a great example of how metamodernism can use, like science fiction, to comment on what's happening in our world right now. Remember reflexivity, that idea of questioning the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, The Matrix Resurrections forces us to ask if our digital selves are even us anymore. Or just narratives that technology is feeding us.
So, are we becoming slaves to the algorithms? It's so easy to get lost in all the digital noise these days and lose sight of, who we really are.
Exactly. The film blurs the lines between reality and simulation, right?
Yeah.
Mirroring how much of our identity is now shaped by technology.
Right, right.
But it also highlights this importance of questioning those influences and reclaiming agency over our own sense of self.
I love this idea of reclaiming agency. It's like saying, hey, I'm not going to let these external forces, especially the digital ones, define me. I'm going to make conscious choices about who I want to be.
And the film really emphasizes that even in a world that feels increasingly controlled, commodified, that there's still room for genuine human connection.
And self-discovery, right? I mean, Neo and Trinity's love story in that film, what a powerful example of that.
Oh, it's so true. Their connection is so strong, it breaks free from the limits of the Matrix.
Yeah.
It reminds us that even in this simulated world, those real, genuine human connections, those are what ground us.
It's like those connections actually allow them to break free from the system that's trying to control them.
Yeah. It's a powerful message about how vital those relationships are to shaping who we are.
Okay, so we've got Everything Everywhere All at Once showing us the, boundless potential of our identity
Right.
across multiple universes.
Across the multiverse.
Then we've got Moonlight grounding that in a real-world story of fluidity.
From finding beauty in those constant shifts.
Right. And then the Matrix Resurrections challenging us to reclaim our authentic selves amidst all this digital chaos.
3 very different films.
They are. But those core meta-modernist ideas run through all of them.
Yeah, they do.
And the Between Shelves podcast actually recommended a few more films worth checking out.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, like Arrival, which, digs into how language, even the concept of time, can affect how we understand ourselves.
Oh, that's a good one. I love that film.
Right. And then there's The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, a great example of breaking free from your comfort zone
Oh, yeah.
to discover hidden parts of yourself.
I love Walter Mitty. It makes you want to, drop everything, hop on a plane, and go have an adventure.
Talk about embracing change, right?
Exactly.
And we can't forget Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That one dives deep into memory, and how it shapes us even when we try to erase parts of our past.
Oh, that's such a powerful film. Makes you think about those memories we try to bury
Yeah.
and how they still have a hold on us,
How they shape us.
shaping our sense of self.
Even the painful ones.
Yeah. And lastly, we have Ways,
Oh, yes. Ways.
a film that looks at family dynamics,
Right.
trauma, and healing.
How those things ripple through generations.
Exactly. It's another example of how interconnected our identities are
With those around us.
with those around us.
Wow. What a watch list.
It's incredible how these ideas of meta-modernism and identity are woven into so many different stories and genres.
It is.
And you know what? It shows that meta-modernism isn't just some abstract theory.
Right.
It's happening all around
It's
us.
shaping how we see ourselves, how we make sense of the world.
Exactly.
So, after diving into all of this, what are the biggest takeaways about how metamodernism views identity?
Well, I think the most important thing is embracing complexity and fluidity.
Yeah.
Metamodernism rejects this idea that identity is fixed or easily categorized or defined by simple labels, right?
Right. Yeah.
It recognizes that messy, multifaceted, constantly evolving nature of who we are.
So, instead of searching for that one perfect answer to, who am I?
It's more about embracing the journey of self-discovery
Yeah.
and acknowledging that the answer might change over time.
It's not a fixed destination, it's a process.
It's a process.
This whole deep dive feels like just the tip of the iceberg.
It does, doesn't it?
Which maybe is kind of fitting, given all this talk of fluidity and constant change.
It is fitting. But, metamodernism encourages us to be comfortable with that open-endedness.
Right.
That sense of, continuous exploration and becoming.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching some final destination.
Right.
It's about enjoying the journey itself.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway of all.
Maybe it is.
We're all works in progress, right?
Yeah.
Constantly evolving.
Shaped by the world around us.
But also shaping the world with our choices.
Exactly.
We can embrace the complexity, hold on to hope, and just keep asking those big questions.
Beautifully said. And to our listener, remember, there's no one right way to be in the 21st century.
Yeah.
Lean into those paradoxes, find beauty in the fluidity, and keep exploring those multiple versions of yourself.
Who knows what you might discover along the way?
You never know.